amigos, ¿cómo estáis? Bueno, aquí os traemos otro programa de Freaks and Chicks. En este caso tenemos preparado una cosita bastante especial. Hemos rescatado de nuestros archivos, de nuestra biblioteca, lo que es una entrevista que le hicimos en el año 2012 al dibujante, dibujante por muchos años de Marvel, sobre todo Herb Trimpe. Y bueno, es una cosa bastante especial. La verdad es que no hay muchas entrevistas con este hombre que duren tanto como la que vais a ver. Avisaos antes de nada que la entrevista está formulada en inglés. Lo que pasa es que por lo que hemos podido comprobar en YouTube, si tenéis os va a salir la opción automática de los subtítulos, con lo cual entiendo que la podréis ver. Si no es así, pues bueno, nos lo comentáis y ya vamos viendo. Pero en fin, he dicho antes Herb Trimpe, igual para quien es un poco más profano no sabe quién es. Aquí tenemos un cómic concretamente dibujado por él. Este hombre, pues hombre, estuvo durante estamos hablando de la friolera de 30 años trabajando para la compañía Marvel. Este cómic en particular que habéis visto es la primera aparición de un personaje tan importante como es Lobezno. Y bueno, pues Herb Trimpe desarrolló su labor en Marvel dibujando cómics que en España fueron muy famosos, como en el caso de G.I. Joe, Transformers. Fue el dibujante de Hulk, precisamente donde aparece aquí Lobezno, durante, pues creo que fueron 8 años, dibujando toda la colección, anuales, etc. Es el segundo dibujante que más tiempo ha dibujado a este personaje junto con Salvo Tema. Y bueno, pues es un bonito homenaje a una persona con la que además llegué a tener bastante trato y trabamos, aunque fuera por correspondencia, cierta amistad. Herb ya nos dejó hace unos años y este es un homenaje para él y espero que os guste la entrevista. Os dejo con ella. Hasta luego. Ya volvemos.
Listo.
How were your beginnings in the comic industry?
Lucky.
For sure.
Extremely fortunate. I was always interested in drawing comics, mostly comic strips, like in a newspaper. But I spent, during the time when there was a military draft in the U.S. and all young men had to, sign up and then be inducted and spend time in the service. So I was 4 years in the Air Force, and during that time, a friend who went to school, I went to art school with, became the production chief at Marvel Comics. And he did a little penciling and inking on the side. And so when I got out, he said, well, bring some samples up. And I said, well, I don't have any samples. The last work I did was 4 years ago in school. And he said, well, bring those, it's okay. So I talked to a man, Sal Brodsky, who was more or less reviewing people who had artwork. And at that time, there wasn't very many. It's not like today. It's very competitive today. It's very, intense. It's like a big deal. It wasn't really a big deal then because comic books were not a favored form of literature. And so, people, the average person knew who Superman was, or maybe Batman, but nobody knew who Spider-Man was then. And Marvel was second to DC. DC was the big company, and Marvel was kind of the second. But Stan Lee, who was the editor-in-chief, he had a vision about the way comics should be done in terms of working with the artist. And it basically revolutionized it revolutionized comics mostly in the area of the superhero, which he and some other artists, mostly Jack Kirby and a few others, had developed going back into the early 1960s. And and the stories were fun and they were fresh and the language was catchy and interesting, and he made the characters like real human beings, you know, that had their own little problems on the side and so on.
Sí, sí, es cierto además.
So it was kind of a fun thing. So I wound up getting work right away inking, because aside from the superhero stuff, we were also doing westerns, romance, comics, humor titles, stuff like that. And so I wound up inking westerns. I was getting work on a regular basis, where I was actually working at home as a freelancer, inking westerns that other artists had drawn. And then I think at one point maybe I actually drew one of the stories. I don't really remember, but then I was offered, in those days, you didn't, you know, we weren't using computers, where most of your assembling of the page format and all this stuff and the lettering and the copy is all done on the computer. And then, you know, then it was cut and paste, which real cut and paste. Where you use a scissor to cut out copy, and then you paste it on the original page that would go to the printer. A lot of people, they don't know that. They don't know that cut and paste on a computer is actually cut and paste.
No sabe lo que significa realmente eso. Claro.
And there are other terms also in the printing business that is moved over into the universe of computer language, you know. So I worked in I was offered a job in the when I was working at home doing the inking. We had a machine. This is in connection with this cut and paste and laying out pages by the artwork and the copy by hand. Usually, anything that was in type, you would send out to a printer, and then they would send you back these galleys that you would then, it was print quality of the copies that you would then cut out and put into place on page format. Well, you know, they decided it would be a good idea, instead of sending it out, to get a machine to do that, to do it in the office. So that opened up a job opportunity, and they asked me if I wanted to have that job. And I said, sure, why not? So I did, and also I was still doing some work on the side, inking and so on. And so between the photocopy machine, which is, you know, it's not like a copy machine now. I mean, the whole thing was as long as this table. It was the entire process. It was a photo camera that could be adjusted, and then you put stuff on a board, and then, you know, it was in a dark room you worked, and then the paper went into developer and fixer. It was part of the machine, comes out on the other end, and you put it on a dryer. I mean, it was the whole thing. So that was kind of interesting. I did that, and also I worked in between making copies for production. I worked in the bullpen, which was where the on-staff people worked. Are you familiar with the term bullpen? We used to call it a bullpen. Yeah. Kind of like that room in there. Where it's like where everybody collects and does what they're supposed to do. Yeah. So I did that, and for about, 6 months, working with the photo. It was actually, they called it a photostat machine. Between working a stat machine and doing production work in the bullpen with guys like John Romita was working in the bullpen at the time, drawing Spider-Man and he was actually an art director, but there were no titles then. Nobody actually had a title like art director, but he functioned in that role somewhat. So he worked closely with Stan as well as drawing Spider-Man. So Stan asked me one day, he said, "Do you want to draw the Hulk?" Because Marie Severin had been drawing the Hulk, and the book was being developed into, it was actually in a comic with another character. It was split between Submariner and the Hulk in a title called Tales to Astonish. And each story was like about 10 pages long or something like that. And they decided, the book was very popular, and they gave each character his own title. Submariner had his own title, and the Hulk had, the Incredible Hulk was a single title. So I wound up drawing that. I mean, it was a little bit of a break-in period, this kind of thing, because you needed to. There was a certain approach that Stan had, and with layouts and not drawing style so much, but definitely with layouts. And I was a pretty good storyteller, so it didn't take. I think it took maybe one issue to get adjusted, where one of the other artists did some of the layouts in the story where he wasn't quite satisfied with it. But after that, it was free sailing. I never, in 30 years, I don't think I ever had a problem with anything having to do with the storytelling. So I did that. So I was doing production and drawing the Hulk in the office. And even though there were there were only about 10 or 12 people working in the office at the time, because most of the work was done freelance. So it was a very small area, it was a tiny area with the partitions from one workplace to another.
Claro.
And we had a heck of a good time. We had a hell of a good time. A lot of talking, a lot of laughs, a lot of fun. It was a little distracting, actually, to draw. And Stan was always yelling at me. I mean, everybody be talking, but he'd come out and blame me. He said, "Trimpe, can't you keep it down? Keep it down." I said, "Stan."
Claro.
I felt like I was in school,
Esto se ha contestado bastante a lo que hablamos al principio, pero yo diría que vamos a hablar, evidentemente, es inevitable acá hablando siempre de la película.
Sí.
Pregúntale por lo que te he comentado, si creía que si iba a convertirlo en no en si es hablar, ¿no? Sí. Venga.
Ooh, that's nice. So, but to make a short story long, eventually, because of the distraction, he said, and I was living in Manhattan at the time, he said, "Well, why don't you just work at home?" So I just worked at home. I only came into the office was in walking distance. So I just went into the office when I had to deliver jobs or maybe pick up some extra work or something along those lines. And I worked freelance outside the office from that point on.
I suppose you were always asking about modeling. Did you ever imagine?
Who's that character?
Never
heard of him.
No, it's okay.
Really?
El chiste.
Estaba vacilando, Irina. ¿Qué vas a decir? Estaba vacilando.
Okay. Have you ever imagined that this character would get bigger than Spider-Man?
No. Nobody ever had ideas like that. It's not like today where a lot of the artists and creators try to come up with an idea. They think they'll come up with a really first-rate idea. It'll wind up being a movie. No, that was not in the mindset. It was just not done. There were some early attempts at superhero movies before CGI. And, Superman back in the 70s was great, But I mean before that, back in the 60s and so on. And, they were terrible. So nobody really gave it a thought. And a lot of these characters were just developed at the moment for that particular issue with no idea that they would be continuing on after that. And Wolverine, when in the first story that Wolverine was in the full story, he wasn't really even a secondary character. The two main characters that were in conflict were the Hulk and a character called Wendigo. And Wolverine just happened to be, since it took place in the Canadian Northwest, in the forest, Roy Thomas, who was a senior editor under Stan, he wanted to just develop a Canadian, not really a superhero, more of an anti-hero, to bring into the story, to add a little, whatever, he thought it would do. Maybe he and Stan were thinking about the Canadian market, selling comics in Canada. I don't know. But it was basically his idea to have a character based on an animal that lived in that area called a Wolverine, who is they're kind of small, but they're incredibly fierce. They have teeth like spikes, and they're very aggressive. And he wanted a character based on that. So John was the art director at the time, and he did some preliminary sketches on what the costume would look like. And then, and that was more thought put into what you would consider really a throwaway character, that you would use and probably never use again, but you're just doing it for the purposes of that story. Like I myself have come up with many secondary characters just shooting from the hip to fill in a need in a story, and none of them went anywhere.
Claro, sí, ninguno, claro. Vamos a ver más cosas. Vamos a ver más cosillas. Antes de que nos echen.
Sí,
Esto de...
nos van a echar. ¿Cuál de pregunta?
Vamos a ver. Tenemos aquí, por ejemplo...
That the interview is gonna be 10-15 minutes, and probably they will call and hey, go out and...
Pues mira, vamos a hablar en este caso de esta, la que...
They need this room, maybe? Porque necesitan...
I don't know. They just say
Vamos.
10-15 minutes and...
Está bien.
We can hug to you and no, we don't want to live here and... Entonces?
Sí, sí,
Vale.
sí.
Well, this summer at Mexico, you talk about the fact that there weren't a Mexican superhero and so on. If you get the request of making a Spanish superhero, how would you?
How did you hear about that story?
I'm curious how.
What the?
How would you make the Spanish superhero?
But how did you hear about this?
I really couldn't, because no, because I mean I wouldn't be so bold as an American, or to create a character in a culture that I'm not that familiar with. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of. I mean, we did one. We did Captain Britain, but that's a lot closer to the truth. You know what I mean? But I mean, I don't know. It's not. I was asked that question. Yeah, that question in Mexico, and I don't know. I think I said basically the same thing. But I mean, it would be fun. I mean, like, so nobody else could see it. I would maybe do it. I would probably make the character female.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you think?
Que lo haría mujer.
Sí. Sí, no, eso sí.
Yeah.
Sacudida.
I mean, that would be the fun of it, because Latinas are very, and Spanish women are very.
Porque porque villanos sí que hay, pero superhéroes no.
There are villains, but not superheroes.
Villanos sí que hay.
Really, there are many Spanish villains.
Que sí hay tantos.
Oh, there always has been.
There are bad
In American movies,
Claro,
Mexican
que ya no
movies
sé qué.
are always portrayed as, some crazy enemy or something like that.
Sí, villanos sí que hay porque Chris Claremont creó a Vargas, que es un villano que se enfrenta al Patrulla X, a los X-Men.
Ajá.
Pues,
Colombianos, same thing with the drugs.
Vargas, sí.
Puerto Rico with, the city gangs, New York City gangs, and so on.
Y ahora sí me interesa mucho que nos comente un
Sí.
poquillo sobre este
So
tema.
there needs to be a Spanish superhero then.
Sí.
Yeah.
Sí.
I'll work on it.
Sí.
But you are a person that are very
¿Cómo has puesto aquí? Bueno.
involved. Okay. You are a person that you are very involved with the people that have lost everything, with the 11th of September, and so on. Tell us about a little bit about this program.
What, on
That,
September,
September
the
11th.
9/11 thing?
Yeah.
Well, I was basically a volunteer. I mean, I lived 2 hours outside the city, but I was involved in the Episcopal Church, the Anglican Church, which is very similar to the Catholic Church. In fact, it is the Catholic Church separated. It's a separate faction from the Catholic Church. Well, actually, all Protestant faiths are really, I guess, when you think about it. But I mean, the liturgy is exactly the same during services. The mass is the same. It's very, very similar. So I was very active in the church at the time. And when 9/11, when that occurred, I thought to myself, it wasn't for any real spiritual reasons. I just wanted to see what happened. I wanted to get in the middle of it and find out, like it's a war, and it's right here, and I want to see it. I want to be part of it. So I had no training. I had no training as far as being a medic goes, because there were a lot of people in the medical profession there. And since most of the city agencies, firefighters and police, many of those have an Irish or Catholic and Catholic background. It's traditional, and those jobs kind of run in the family. If dad is a firefighter, the son is a firefighter. And so they were very comfortable with having chaplains from the Catholic faith, or as it turned out, any faith, be on site to either talk to or whatever they needed to do. That's what the chaplains were actually providing a pastoral need on a site where there was a lot of emotion and a lot of grief and a lot of anger and a lot of mixed emotions were happening there. And so the Episcopal Diocese, which is based in New York, they were sending people in. And I was a deacon at the time. I'm not like an ordained priest, but I am an ordained deacon. I'm inactive, but I still hold that position. And so I kind of just got on a list. And you kind of had your choice where you could go. You could go to the there was the hospital where the remains were being taken uptown, and they had like freezer facilities there until people and bits of people could be, I don't mean to be gross, but it could be identified, this type of thing. There were respite centers in and around the site where families could come in and they could talk to counselors and so on. You could act in that capacity. And then there were those who could volunteer for the morgue that was at Ground Zero itself, where the remains were first brought. You know, you've seen the pictures of the ramp and the thing going up with the flag covering the body bag and all this kind of thing. And that's what I chose to do that. So, and I was there a couple of days a week for over an 8-month period, and I have to tell you, it was one of the most fulfilling and satisfying things I have ever done in my entire life. It was awesome. I mean, there were people from all over the world. It was hard to find somebody local because there were volunteers not only from police departments in Texas and Oregon, but there was a construction company from Poland there that was helping to remove the debris, you know, and all this kind of, and there was just this tons and tons of people just pitching in. And it was like, in a way, it was what you imagine to be the perfect community. And it lasted that way for quite a while, but in the end, of course, people have to argue. So, you know, in the end, there was personal conflict, and there was territorial, disputes over who had authority here or here or here. Was it the Port Authority police, or was it the fire department? You know, so you get into that kind of thing after a while. But in the beginning, it was like dying and going to heaven, basically, in an environment, especially at night when the floodlights were on and they were still working, and the steam from the heat under the ground rose into the air. It was like, it looked like Dante's Inferno, you know, but it was a wonderful place to be and to work,
Wow. Okay. Bueno, pues muchas gracias. Lo único, pues, si serías tan amable de firmarnos algunos ejemplares. A few signatures.
Yeah.